Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the LIHEAP Quarterly Performance and Management Reports for states and territories. My name is Heather Jones, and I am the Policy and Evaluation Branch Chief for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program within the Division of Energy Assistance located within the Office of Community Services. Today is the starting of our series of training and technical assistance opportunities before the first quarterly reporting deadline. Thank you for joining us. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Katie Green, DEA Special Assistant, to cover some of the housekeeping items and kick off our discussion.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks to everybody for joining today's webinar. Today, we'll start with a high-level overview of the quarterly reporting requirements, including why OCS is implementing a quarterly report. Heather will then provide a step-by-step walkthrough of the quarterly report form. And during today's webinar, our staff will answer some questions via the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then we will select some questions from the Q&A box to discuss live during the Q&A session towards the end of the agenda. And to ensure that we don't accidentally miss any questions, please use the Q&A box for questions and reserve the chat box at the bottom of your screen for all other comments and greetings. And finally, the webinar slides are available now. We put them in the chat, so you can find the PDF, the link to that PDF in the chat box. And we'll note that the webinar is also being recorded and will be published on our website shortly. So before we dive into the specifics of the report and the required data collection elements, we want to begin by sharing why OCS is asking grant recipients to report data on a quarterly basis. And before we get to the why, we want to say that, in designing this report, we strive to only ask for the information that we absolutely need to minimize the reporting burden for grant recipients to the greatest extent possible. So we recognize and acknowledge and understand that our grant recipients are managing a lot right now with the ongoing pandemic, with many of you standing up very successful LIHEAP programs for the first time and administering historic levels of funding across many of the programs you run. So we intentionally only ask for information that we know you're already collecting and asking for aggregate totals wherever possible, rather than asking you all to disaggregate data by component type with the goal of helping to streamline this reporting. And throughout the process of designing the quarterly report, OCS sought feedback from our grant recipients and stakeholders and made changes wherever possible to further reduce grantee burden. And OCS is implementing LIHEAP quarterly reporting to help strengthen the program and improve our ability to highlight the impact that LIHEAP is having on households across the country. The quarterly reports will help OCS track key information in near real time. So as many of you know, currently OCS does not receive comprehensive performance and management data until approximately 3 months after the end of each federal fiscal year. So the LIHEAP quarterly report will assist us in receiving data and information about LIHEAP during the current federal fiscal year. This near real-time data will be particularly important for the remainder of this fiscal year as LIHEAP grant recipients both administer historic levels of LIHEAP funding and develop and implement plans to reach the most vulnerable households amidst the volatile price increases that we're seeing, energy price increases across the country. These reports will also be critical in helping us to address challenges in a timely manner, including unmet training and technical assistance needs, approaching obligation deadlines, and challenges related to outreach and intake, such as reaching newly eligible populations. We learned from our collective efforts to obligate CARES Act funding that timely obligation information was essential to ensuring that almost all available funds were leveraged and not returned to the Treasury. Given that the ARP allocation is significantly larger than the CARES Act allocation, this is especially important as we get closer to this September 30th obligation deadline. And finally, as you all know, LIHEAP has received significant interest and inquiry from the White House, HHS, and Congress this past year. And because of the Paperwork Reduction Act and the limitations that places on our ability to collect ad hoc data from more than 9 grant recipients at a time, these quarterly reports will help allow us as an office to respond to frequent inquiries regarding the program with timely and accurate information. So as folks know, we received emergency clearance from OMB to implement quarterly reports in mid-February on February 18th. This opened up a 60-day public comment period, which will close on April 17th. We welcome and encourage public comment from our grant recipients and stakeholders, and OCS will be assessing and considering public comments before finalizing the tool for use in the remainder of the fiscal year and future fiscal years. So after reviewing and responding publicly to comments received, very similar to how we did recently with our LIHEAP reports, we will submit an extension request to OMB, which will open up a 30-day comment period, the final comment period. And once we respond to any final comments and receive that OMB approval, the reports will be approved for the next 3 years for use over that 3-year period. And so while there's an urgent need for the quarterly reports this year with the American Rescue Plan obligation deadline approaching, rising energy prices and the ongoing pandemic, quarterly reports will be incredibly important in future years as well for the reasons we walked through on the last slide. And it's our hope to include the quarterly report in OLDC in future years. So the time periods and anticipated due dates for the quarterly reports in the first reporting year are provided on this slide. For fiscal year 2022, reporting will begin with data from October 1st, 2021. However, as you know, the first and second quarters will be combined and due on April 29th. So for this first federal fiscal year, FY 2022, OCS has consolidated quarters 1 and 2 to provide grantees with time to gather the requested data and get used to reporting on a quarterly basis. Before each report is due, OCS will issue instructions for submission via an action transmittal. And OCS plans to issue the first action transmittal as soon as we can for the quarters 1 and 2 report due on the 29th. However, the form we release in this AT is the exact same one that grant recipients already have. So last month, we disseminated to grant recipients via email an unlocked Excel file that was made available for immediate use. And we did this because we didn't want to hold you back and make you wait for that AT. So folks have that, and the one we distribute later this week will be that same file that folks already have access to. And so as you've seen in our prior communications regarding the quarterly report, this year the forms will be submitted via an Excel spreadsheet on Basecamp for states and territories. And we're asking our tribal grantees to email the reports to liheap@acf.hhs.gov. And for folks that are new, we'll be sending more information about the submission process via Basecamp in that forthcoming AT. And we'll note that Basecamp, for those that might not have used it before, is a web-based platform that allows you to upload the completed spreadsheet for submission to a specific folder that we will create for each state and territory grant recipient. And as mentioned before, again, in future years, and after we receive that OMB regular clearance, we plan to collect the quarterly reports in OLDC. And so as Heather mentioned at the top, this webinar is the first event in our series of training and technical assistance on the quarterly report. We will be hosting a similar webinar for tribes on Thursday. And to help LIHEAP recipients prepare for quarterly reporting and the first reporting period in particular, we'll be hosting a series of 5 office hours to support state, territory, and tribal grant recipients. Each session will be limited to 15 individuals at a time to maximize assistance, and the registration is on a first-come, first-served basis. We are asking grant recipients to pre-register and include any potential questions that you would like to be addressed by OCS staff in the registration form. This does not preclude grant recipients from asking questions during the session or additional questions during the session, but instead is intended to allow us to cover frequently asked questions early on in the session or through written guidance so that we can maximize the time that we have during each office hour. And as you'll see here highlighted on this slide, we've designated certain sessions for states and territories, and others are designated for tribes. So for states and territories, for you all, we've reserved the 4th, the 11th, and the 14th. And for your tribal colleagues, we have the 5th and the 12th of April. And we will publish the frequently asked questions from this webinar and the office hours following all sessions. We look forward to answering your questions about the quarterly report throughout the webinar today and during the office hours in April. And with that, I will turn it back over to Heather to walk through the quarterly report.
Thank you, Katie. Before we walk through the specific sections of the report, we want to provide a brief overview of the data we are asking grant recipients to collect on a quarterly basis. Section 1 will ask you to report the total number of unduplicated households assisted each quarter and the unduplicated count for each quarter from the previous year for the same time period. Section 2 will ask you to report the number of times a household receives LIHEAP assistance that prevented loss of home energy and the number of times LIHEAP assistance restored services. In Section 3, we will ask about the amount of LIHEAP funding that has been obligated. For Section 4 of the LIHEAP quarterly report includes questions concerning LIHEAP program implementation and support. These include yes and no questions regarding program changes, collaboration and coordination, training and technical assistance, quotes from stakeholders, lessons learned, notable accomplishments, and challenges. There are some key definitions to keep in mind when completing the LIHEAP quarterly report. LIHEAP defines the term household as any individual or group of individuals who are living together as one economic unit for whom energy services are customarily purchased in common or who make undesignated payments for those services in the form of rent. Household members are those individuals who comprise the household unit. LIHEAP reporting includes counting the household, not the head of household or the persons in the household. Grant recipients are required to report unduplicated counts of LIHEAP assisted households for all types of LIHEAP assistance provided each quarter. Unduplicated counts mean the households are only counted once. The LIHEAP report template, as Katie indicated, is an Excel workbook. An example of how this report looks is in this slide, and we will refer to these screenshots in the slide as we go through this presentation. It was designed to be a cumulative report with separate worksheets for each quarter. Quarter 1 and 2, as Katie noted, have been combined this year, and then we have quarter 3 and 4. We will now take a look at the different sections of the LIHEAP quarterly report. For the first portion of the report, you will notice it's called the recipient information. In the recipient information section, you will include all the information being requested, including name, phone number, and email address for the individual who is filling out the quarterly data report or the person who should be contacted by OCS if questions concerning the report arise. Section 1 of the quarterly report, you will report the total household assisted. This data requires the recipient to report the total number of unduplicated households assisted during that quarter. This includes all program types of heating, cooling, crisis, and weatherization assistance during that quarter. An assisted household is one that has applied and received LIHEAP assistance. Households who have applied for LIHEAP benefit but have not received one by the end of the quarter should not be counted in the quarter until the household actually receives their benefit. Grant recipients who are also asked to report on the total number of households assisted across program components during the same period last year. OCS will stop asking for this data once we have this information from the prior year's quarter. However, because the first 2 quarters are collapsed for the first year federal fiscal year 2022, you will need to report these assisted households during the same period for the first 2 quarters next year. After quarter 2 in FY23, OCS will pre-populate data from the prior year's quarter. Being able to compare households assisted across years by different quarters will allow us better to respond to stakeholders. Lately, and as well as you to respond to stakeholders, as lately we all have received many questions about how current service levels compare to prior years. Quarter 3 and 4 will include a section of total cumulative households assisted. This number will automatically calculate based on the information that the recipient provides in the prior quarters. Again, an unduplicated count of households means that the household are to be counted only once regardless of the type of LIHEAP assistance received in the same quarter. For example, even if a household receives assistance and crisis assistance in the same quarter, the household will only be counted once in that quarter. However, households that receive assistance in different quarters will be counted in each quarter. So let's take a look at an example of how to report unduplicated total households assisted for the quarterly report. I'm going to say it again. Households assisted should be reported in the quarter that they received assistance. In this example, we have three households, A, B, and C. Household A received a heating assistance on October 30th, 2021, and crisis assistance February 1st, 2022. So for the combined quarters of 1 and 2, this household would only be counted once, as both of the date of assistance were within the quarter 1 and 2 timeframe of October 1st through March 31st. Household B received heating assistance October 30th, 2021, and crisis assistance April 1st, 2022. So it would be counted in quarter 1 and 2 for heating assistance and quarter 3 for crisis assistance, as the date of the crisis was provided was April 1st and falls within quarter 3's timeframe, April 1st through June 30th. Household C received heating assistance. Again, they were busy on October 30th, 2021, crisis assistance April 1st, 2022, and cooling assistance August 1st. So it would be counted in quarter 1 and 2 for heating assistance, quarter 3 for the crisis assistance, and quarter 4 for the cooling assistance, as August 1st falls between quarter 4's reporting dates of July 1st through September 30th. So now let's take a look at the total unduplicated households by quarter. For quarter 1 and 2, the total unduplicated households assisted is 3. That's A, B, and C household. For quarter 3, the total unduplicated household is 2, B and C. And for quarter 3, the total unduplicated household would be 1, because C, as in our example, is the only household to receive assistance between July 1st and September 30th. In the next line, for quarter 3 and 4, the total cumulative households assisted for quarter 3 would be 5, 3 from quarter 1 and 2, and 2 from quarter 3. The total cumulative households for quarter 4 would be 6, 5 from quarter 3 plus the 1 from quarter 4. Because the same households can be included in the unduplicated count in different quarters, this may make the total cumulative household assisted count include the same households from previous quarters. This also means that if you compare the total cumulative count of households across all quarterly reports that is included in quarter 4, reporting will be a higher count of households if this is compared to the any assistance received data in the unduplicated count of the annual LIHEAP household report long form. This is because LIHEAP household report includes a unique household served in 1 year, while the quarterly report includes these unique households served by each quarter. For Section 2, Performance Management, you will report the total occurrences where households received assistance to prevent or restore home energy by each quarter. The count will include duplicate households that received assistance more than once. This duplicate count of occurrences may also include occurrences where weatherization or equipment repair and replacement benefits are included. This may require that you coordinate with your weatherization partners that could be external to your state or territory agency to identify inoperable equipment that was repaired or replaced using LIHEAP benefits. This is the same data we request in Module 2, Sections 6 and 7 of the annual LIHEAP performance data form. The difference is you will be reporting this quarterly during the current fiscal year. For Section 3, use of LIHEAP funds, you will report the amount, not the percentages of LIHEAP funding that has been obligated for each funding source, including LIHEAP FY 2022 non-supplemental funding or the regular block grant funding, and the American Rescue Act funding 2021 funding. We've also included a placeholder for any additional supplement allotments received. These obligated funds will be reported cumulatively for each quarter to the next. For example, if you obligate $3 million of regular block grant in quarter 1, and then in quarter 3, you did not have any additional obligations, the LIHEAP 2022 non-supplemental amount would remain the same amount of $3 million in quarter three. If in quarter four you obligated an additional $10 million, then the LIHEAP 2022 non-supplemental amount would indicate a total amount of $13 million. The $3 million from quarter one and the $10 million from quarter four would comprise that $13 million. This information is requested again on the LIHEAP Performance Data Form, Module 1, the Grantee Survey, after the end of each fiscal year. Note, the use of funds represents the state's obligation of federal LIHEAP funds, not the expenditure of federal LIHEAP funds. In some cases, obligated funds are not actually expended until after the end of the federal fiscal year. For additional guidance on expenditure, the Division of Energy Assistance issued an information memorandum on December 17, 2021, that provides clarification of obligation and expenditure. This can be located on the OCS LIHEAP website. It is important OCS receives this information to assist with technical training and assistance to ensure grant recipients obligate both the FY 2022 regular block grant and the American Rescue Plan funding. This funding must be obligated by September 30th. If not, in the case of the regular block grant, these funds could be reallocated. And for the American Rescue Plan funds, these funds will have to be returned to the US Treasury. Section 4 includes the LIHEAP program implementation and support. You will be asked to answer 10 questions in combined quarter 1 and 2, and also in quarter 3. There will be 12 questions in quarter 4. The first 7 questions include a yes/no dropdown, and then a space where you can provide a brief explanation. Let's take a look at the first 7 questions. In quarter 1 and 2, you're being asked if you've made any changes since submitting your current LIHEAP model plan. These changes include income guidelines, income verification and documentation requirements, changes to outreach strategies, benefit or matrix, or increasing your crisis maximum amounts. If you change prioritizing vulnerable populations, including the elderly, disabled, and young children, or if you change policy on arrearage forgiveness, including paying off a client's outstanding energy bill, or if you have made any other changes in your LIHEAP policies. These questions are being separated to track responses so we can add them to a data table for further evaluation. Some of the same questions will be asked in quarters 3 and 4 to track the progression of these changes. So let's take a look at quarter 3's questions. In quarter 3, the same first 7 questions are asked, except you'll need to provide any changes that you reported in quarter 1 and 2. And then again, just provide a brief explanation of that. In quarter 4, again, same questions we're asking, except in this case, you will be asked if you made any changes, what were the results after making these changes, and again, to provide a brief explanation. So again, we are looking at this as something that we transition through as we go through each quarter to provide those updates. Now let's take a look at question 8 through 10 for quarter 1 and 2. These questions ask you about your collaboration efforts, challenges, and training and technical assistance requests. And they also ask you to include a quote about the impact of LIHEAP from a LIHEAP household. Please note these questions will change in quarters 3 and 4. For quarter 3, questions 8 through 10, ask you to provide any information on the result of any changes you made in the first quarter. If you're continuing to collaborate with utility programs, and to provide examples of successful collaboration, and to provide a quote about the impact of LIHEAP from a staff member, government official, or stakeholder. Again, note these questions do change in quarter 4. For quarter 4, questions 8 through 10 ask grant recipients to share a notable accomplishment, successes achieved during the fiscal year, challenges with administering LIHEAP this year. We request you list out lessons learned as it relates to administering LIHEAP. And then questions 11 and 12 will ask you as a grant recipient for what OCS can do better in the upcoming federal fiscal year to provide support for you and your sub-grant recipients. to, and then we also are going to ask for a quote on the impact of LIHEAP from the utility vendor. Section 5 is the remarks section for you to provide any additional explanation regarding the reliability of the validity of the report. And then section 6 is the certification, is where you, as a grant recipient, certify that the report is accurate. So now we're going to move into the question and answers. I know I've been seeing a lot of people post. And as a reminder, we're going to ask you to enter the questions in the Q&A so that we're able to print those off and gather them and include them in subsequent FAQs as after we conclude our office hours. So I'm going to go back to Katie and see, Katie, do we have any questions?
Thanks, Heather. I just put a reminder in the chat. So if folks have questions, please enter those in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Okay, Heather, so we have one question. Can the data be estimated or should only the exact data be provided?
We're not asking for estimated data in this report. We're asking for the exact data that you have at the time that you're making the report.
Any other questions from folks? Please feel free to answer, or excuse me, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section there. Here's another question, Heather. So should the data be 10/1, so October 1st through September 30th?
So the data that you're going to be reporting for Q1 would start with October 1st and go through March 31st. For Q2, you will update the first two for this year, Vicki, are combined together. So Q1 and Q2. But for Q2, it would be from January through March. But because we combined them, it should be from October 1st through March 31st, and it won't be due until April 29th for the combined first and second quarter. For the third quarter, you should report from April 1st through June 30th, and that will be due at the end of July. And then for the third quarter, you would report from July 1st through September 30th, and that would be due October 31st. So it's through the end of the quarter, but it's not due until the end of the month. But the 4 quarters combined will be for the entire fiscal year, the current fiscal year.
Thanks, Heather. And this isn't a question so much as an ask for our grantees, but I'm seeing that someone has said that some folks have been, our colleague Richard has said that some folks are reporting issues with Basecamp. So if folks are having problems with submitting through Basecamp, please let us know either in the chat or contact your program specialist, but we want to make sure that those kinks are worked out as folks gear up to support or to submit these reports. So if folks have additional information that they could share with us, that would be really helpful.
And just so you know, we did have a grantee reach out to us. They were a new grantee, and we did get them access to Basecamp this morning, and then they could get their reports there, and they could upload their performance data reports. I know you're under the gun to get those done by the end of this month. I know there's a lot on your plate right now. And so if you are having those problems, please reach out to your program specialist. Please let us know, and we will work to get you access to Basecamp so that you can download your report, that you can complete it, and then upload it to Basecamp for the performance data report.
Heather, another question. So if a grantee does not have the data for the previous year on a quarterly basis, should we report this year's quarterly data only? Or excuse me, should they report this year's quarterly data only until they can get a quarterly breakdown of the prior year's data.
Well, we want you to report as much as you can, and we understand that you may have to go back for last year's and determine that. And so we will work with you. My first suggestion is contact your program specialist. We'll have other technical training and assistance where we may be able to identify where you can get that information. I know it sounds easy, but it's not. It's never easy when it comes to a systems issue, right? And it's never easy when you're dealing with thousands of applications. Nothing's ever easy. I certainly recognize that. But please contact your program specialist, ask them, and we will work out technical training assistance, and we'll try to provide that to you. Maybe we can find the data element you're looking for and give that to you. If it absolutely comes down to that you can't, please provide an explanation as to what's happening, what the status is, and why that can't be done.
Thanks, Heather. So we have a couple more questions, and one that is an error that we'll correct. So thank you for the astute observation that we did include, and apologies, we included the wrong date for the fourth quarter report due date. So it's listed on the slide currently as September 30th. I think Heather and I have that ARP obligation deadline on the brain, but it will in fact be the end of October. So that obligation deadline will be October 31st. Heather, we've got a couple other questions. So I'll go with this one first. Apart from the performance data form module 2, section 6 and 7, and section 2 of the quarterly report, are there other items that we can cross-reference with other LIHEAP forms?
So in question, yeah. So in the first question, of course, assisted households, you should have that data already for your household report. What we went back and forth, just so you know, we didn't ask you to break it down by program component. We just said, how many households have you assisted? So if you've assisted with energy assistance, crisis, cooling, year-round crisis, we just wanted a total for that quarter instead of breaking it down by program type. Your federal household report, you actually break that down by program type. But then on that federal household report, as I mentioned, when you go to any type of assistance, that's your unduplicated count. It is going to be different for this quarterly report because you're not looking at a whole year. You're just looking at that quarter. But you would use your same principles in your system where you would look at that date range and say, what are the households that received assistance, and then eliminate any that received more than one type of assistance. So that's where I would go for that component. And then the performance data, I've already indicated in the slides, that's module 2. And then the obligated, you would want to get that from your module 1 of the performance data reports. The questions we're asking are open-ended. I mean, it's either yes, you've made a change. So if you really want to take a look at it, you need to know what your model plan is. I would use my model plan as a reference, and I'd look at, have I changed anything like my benefit matrix? I mean, these are things you're going to know. My income eligibility and guidelines, my documentation. You as a program manager are probably tracking that. And if you're not, you're probably going to be asked about it. So I would highly recommend that you keep a list, because they'll come ask you, well, what have you done? What changes have you made? Usually in the past years, I'll be honest with you, before COVID, we would tweak our plans, a lot of us, right, every few years. And some of us were working with performance management, trying to get our benefit matrix updated. But for the most part, plans kind of, we would look at them and we would make these tweaks and we change our policies. But when COVID hit, it shook everyone in the sense that we had to make changes at that point. Some things that were in person had to go remote, right? Some documentation wasn't even available because the business couldn't even answer their phone. So what we're asking for is take a look at your state plan. Have you made any changes? And not just your state plan, take a look at your policy and procedure. Take a look at your application, anything you're doing for outreach. What are you doing for outreach that you haven't done before? What are you trying that's new? We've heard some grant recipients are getting a mobile unit to go out and meet the people and gather applications from Walmart parking lots. I thought that was a brilliant idea because we're all concerned that we have this funding, that there's such a need, and that we want to increase outreach as we can. So we're just asking questions around that. So some of it's going to be from your program information on a local level. But when I think about that, I think about what did I do in my state plan? What policy procedures have I changed? And how have I changed the program as far as benefit matrix income guidelines? Saw a lot of people go from FPL to SMI. Saw some people go from 130 to 150. So those are things that we're really interested in knowing as it helps you expend those funds. I hope I answered that. If I didn't, is there anything else? Okay.
If there is anything else or any follow-up questions to that, if folks could put it in the Q&A, that would be great, and we'll field it back to Heather. In the meantime, we've got a question, Heather, about the submission of the materials in the report. So are we downloading the Excel spreadsheets from Basecamp, or can we use the ones that were already emailed to us individually?
You know, I would download the ones from Basecamp to be safe, just because we're not going to change them, but I would do the download and then it reports that and then fill that one out. It's not going to have any pre-population on it, right? It's not going to be like the performance data report. We're not pre-populating anything. It is the same document, but I would download it, use it in case, just in case, guys. And that'll probably be our instructions in the AT that any minor adjustment was made, including just even a typo or something, and then upload those back to Basecamp. And we're going to figure out that process. And like I said, get you instructions on that fairly soon. You're kind of familiar with it already with the LIHEAP performance data report. So we're just getting that all organized and put on Basecamp, and we'll give you that access and make sure that we get that, you know, that you can do that. So.
Another question, Heather. So if the territory only receives LIHEAP funding under the social services block grant, but did not receive 2021 ARP LIHEAP funding, is a quarterly report currently due? This particular territory only usually reports programmatically via the annual post-expenditure SSBG report. So
great question. This is a LIHEAP funding report. So it only includes households that you use LIHEAP funding for, right? So if other funding like the social services block grant is used to provide utility assistance, or ERA, the Energy Rental Assistance Program, those households are not included in here unless you use LIHEAP funding in conjunction with that wraparound service. So this is a LIHEAP report. We're only reporting on LIHEAP funding. So my answer to that is if they don't use LIHEAP funding, then they would not submit this quarterly report. They will want to provide an explanation, because if they have a contract with us, or if they have an agreement with us, then we need to know why they didn't submit a quarterly report if that was the issue. And if you're working with them, then we also need that. And I would definitely let the program man specialist know about that. Hi, Jennifer. I saw her question. Yes, just to clarify, you should include the unduplicated counts of the FFY 20 regular block grant and ARP. You are not being asked to separate that out at this point for the quarterly reports. You don't have to separate components, and you don't have to separate that funding out on the unduplicated assisted household component. Down in the obligation, that's where we're asking you to separate what has been obligated under each funding source.
And we had a question come in about Basecamp and where folks can download the forms. We'll be disseminating more information. Ideally, hopefully we're planning to get that out by the end of the week, an action transmittal that will include more information about where those forms can be found, but currently they are not on Basecamp yet. But more information will be coming in the action transmittal shortly. Another Basecamp question. I don't know the answer to this one, Heather. Can states have more than one person with access to Basecamp? If so, who do we contact?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't know if ACOM can answer that question for us.
Yes, I have that. Yes,
Thanks, Tracy.
yes, we program specialists or anyone who has access to Basecamp within OCS can set up access for more than one individual per folder. Just need to know the email address of that person.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks?
Just to reiterate, I know when we say unduplicate account and it feels duplicated, you have to look at it, but the quarterly report is reporting quarterly, so it's a different time frame. And that's why if you add all 4 quarters up, you are going to include households that have been counted in previous quarters. That came up as a really great question, and we really appreciate that coming before, and we could prepare the answer for that and give you guys a walkthrough. I hope that was helpful. If you still have questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out to your program specialist or any of us in OCS, and we'll work to circle back with you to explain how those counts are made.
We had a question about the registration for the office hours, so I'm happy to put the link to the DCL in the chat with all of the different office hour registrations. Those registrations will close after they hit capacity at 15 people. But to my knowledge, I believe they're all still open right now. There's one that's getting close to capacity, but all of those still have spots available. And I will put the link to the DCL in the chat in just a minute here.
Any other questions? Because we really, we devote enough time so that we could answer any questions. And office hours, you'll notice that we have 3 there, 15. Of course, that doesn't include all of our states and grant recipients. Those are additional assistance. And so some people have asked us, and if you've been with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program office hours, well, I want to hear what other people are doing. That's fine. Come with your questions. We'll have a discussion, but it gives a small group more of an opportunity instead of these large webinars and trying to use technology to have that open discussion and ask those questions. So we want to avail ourselves that way. And so we know that doesn't totally add up, but it's close. Some grant recipients, honestly, probably won't come to the office hours. They are optional. They're if you want to hear additional things, you want additional assistance. And we really are there to just be a resource and answer questions. So don't feel like you have to, but if you have additional questions, definitely come to those office hours or register for one of those office hours because we want to make sure that you understand what these reporting requirements are these new reporting requirements are. And I can't say enough about what Katie said. We understand we're asking at a time that is incredibly busy and that you guys are doing so much hard work on behalf of low-income citizens. And so we just want to make sure that we can be as supportive to you as possible in your positions. Oh, I saw something over in chat. You can always ask questions even if you don't attend an office hours. And we'll kind of cover that in our last slide, but your program specialists, OCS staff, and all of us are here to support you. So any questions you have, my recommendation is go through your program specialist, but we all work together to try to resolve any issues you have around that. Okay, so just to kind of go for what we were saying about, kind of wrapping up here. As we indicated at the start of this webinar, this is the start of the series of technical training and assistance opportunities. It's not the end. Our next step includes conducting those office hours. We encourage you to sign up for it if you want additional, close-knit kind of, smaller group interaction. However, don't hesitate to contact your program specialist or OCS if you're having problems. We hope to have future technical assistants helping us with these reports also. So we've included on the slide resources you can access on the OCS website, including the Dear Colleague letters issued in January and February concerning LIHEAP quarterly report requirements. We've also included the DEA contact information link, so you have the contact information about your program specialist or any of the staff that works for the Division of Energy Assistance. If you have any additional questions, please attend the office hours, and you can always reach out to your program specialist, as we've always said. And note that we wanted to make a note that the LIHEAP quarterly performance and management report is still going through the OMB, or Office of Management and Budget approval process, and we're still taking public comments on that. We will be responsive to those public comments, and we will share with everyone what our responses to those comments are. We just wanted you to note that we're operating this, but we're moving forward in a sense because we want to be able to ask those questions, have you share the great work you're doing. And in this division, I'm telling you, to tell that story, not only to the White House, but to the public, and just get that out. Have you seen some of the releases we've made around the Energy Rental Assistance Program, as well as the anniversary of the American Rescue Plan? That website was brought up, that launch page was brought up, and there's some pretty touching videos out there of the work you guys do and just the commitment and the work that you guys do every day on behalf of low-income citizens with the LIHEAP program. So again, if you have any questions, please reach out to your program specialists and us here at OCS. We want to do whatever we can to help you be successful in reporting this. We're not gathering data to just gather data. Dr. Howard would say that many times if she was here. We gather data because we think it's important. It's important to tell your story. It's important for us to know, and it's important for us to hear what you have to say and to provide technical and training that you're requesting, because you know your training needs probably best than anyone else around you. And so we want to be responsive to that. And we also want to be very proactive in the training that we can provide. And with that, unless there's any other questions, Katie, I would just like to thank Katie and thank you for your time and participation in this webinar today. And if we can give you 10 minutes back in your day, which is always appreciated.
Thanks so much, everyone.